She still wore her black dress from the funeral, her eyes swollen from crying over her father's casket. The scent of the lilies from the service clung to her clothes, mixing with the stale air of the home she'd left just 6 hours ago. Something felt wrong. The silence wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the silence of absence, of things missing, of a space that had been deliberately emptied. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she walked through the living room. Trevor's gaming console was gone from the TV stand. His jacket wasn't on the hook by the door. The photos of them together had been removed from the mantel, leaving only the clean rectangles where dust hadn't settled. Naomi's heart started to race, but she forced herself to stay calm. Maybe he'd moved things around. Maybe he was upstairs. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for why her husband wasn't at her father's funeral and why their home looked like someone had selectively robbed it. Then she saw the papers on the kitchen table. They were placed in the exact center, impossible to miss, arranged with the kind of precision that suggested deliberate cruelty. The top page had bold letters, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Naomi's knees buckled and she caught herself against the counter. Her father had been in the ground for less than 4 hours. 4 hours. She had stood at his graveside, feeling like her world was ending, and the entire time, these papers had been waiting for her here. Her hands shook as she picked up the document. Filed 3 days ago. 3 days ago, while she was planning her father's funeral. While she was picking out his casket and writing his obituary. While she was sobbing in the hospital chapel after the doctors told her he didn't have much time left. Trevor had filed for divorce 3 days ago. She flipped through the pages, her vision blurring with tears. There was more. Much more. Trevor was claiming he deserved half of her anticipated inheritance. Half of everything her father had built. The petition specifically mentioned expected substantial inheritance from deceased father-in-law, and equitable distribution of marital assets including future inheritance funds. The phone in her purse rang. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. Her sister, Denise. "Naomi, honey, are you okay? You left the reception so quickly." "He's gone." Naomi's voice didn't sound like her own. It was hollow, mechanical. "Trevor. He filed for divorce. While Dad was dying, he filed for divorce." The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Then Denise's voice came back, sharp with fury. "I'm coming over right now. Don't you dare move." Naomi ended the call and walked through the rest of the house in a daze. The bedroom confirmed her fears. Trevor's closet was empty. His toiletries were gone from the bathroom. Even his stupid protein powder had been taken from the kitchen cabinet. He hadn't just filed papers. He'd moved out. Completely. While she was burying her father. She found herself standing in front of her father's study, the one room in the house that had been his when he visited. She pushed open the door and sank into his leather chair, breathing in the faint smell of his cologne that still lingered. "Dad," she whispered to the empty room, "what do I do?" Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she opened it. The message contained a single photo. Trevor and a blonde woman, kissing in what looked like a hotel room. The woman was wearing an expensive-looking robe, the kind luxury hotels provided. Trevor's hand was on her waist, possessive and familiar. Below the photo, a message, "Thought you should know who he's been with. Brittany sends her regards. She wanted to make sure you knew he's been planning this for 6 months. Sorry for your loss." Naomi stared at the screen until the words blurred together. 6 months. Her father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer 7 months ago. The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. Trevor had started planning his exit the moment her father got sick. He'd been waiting. Waiting for her father to die. Waiting for the inheritance he assumed was coming. Waiting to take half of everything and run off with his blonde mistress. The front door burst open. "Naomi." Denise's voice echoed through the house. "Where are you?" "Study," Naomi called back, surprised by how steady her voice sounded now. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something colder, harder. Denise appeared in the doorway, still in her funeral clothes, her face flushed from rushing over. Behind her was their cousin, Marcus, a corporate attorney who'd flown in for the funeral. "Show me the papers," Denise demanded. Naomi handed them over and watched her sister's face transform from concern to pure rage. Marcus read over Denise's shoulder, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is filed in family court," Marcus said quietly. "He's asking for immediate temporary support while the divorce is pending. He's claiming he's been the primary homemaker and needs financial assistance." "Primary homemaker?" Naomi laughed, a bitter sound. "He works full-time as a sales manager. I'm the one who did everything around here. He's lying in his petition, Marcus continued. He claims you kept him in the dark about your finances and that he deserves compensation for supporting you during your father's illness. I supported him. Naomi's voice rose. I paid for everything when he lost his job 2 years ago. I paid his car note, his credit cards, everything. Denise put a hand on her shoulder. We'll fight this. Marcus, can you recommend someone? I'll make some calls tonight, Marcus promised. But Naomi, I need to ask you something important. What did your father leave you? Naomi shook her head. I don't know yet. The will reading is scheduled for next week. Trevor knows that. He knows everything goes through probate first. But he filed anyway, Marcus noted. Which means he's betting on something big. He wouldn't risk this lawsuit if he didn't think there was substantial money involved. My father's business has been struggling, Naomi said. He told me himself about 3 months ago. He said things were tight, that he'd made some bad investments. I don't know what Trevor thinks he's getting, but I don't think there's as much as he hopes. Denise's eyes narrowed. Did Trevor know about the struggling business? I never told him, Naomi said slowly. Dad asked me not to. He said he didn't want Trevor to worry, that he was handling it. So Trevor thinks your father was still wealthy, Marcus said. He thinks he's about to cash in. Naomi looked down at the divorce papers again, at Trevor's signature scrawled across the bottom. Next to it was the signature of his attorney, filed and stamped 3 days ago. 3 days ago, when her father was taking his last breaths. He waited for my father to die, she said softly. He actually waited. He's a snake, Denise spat. A calculating, heartless snake. Naomi's phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. This time it was a screenshot of text messages between Trevor and Brittany. Trevor, once her old man kicks it, we're set. My lawyer says I can claim half of everything. Brittany, and then we can finally be together? No more hiding. Trevor, give it a few months after the funeral, let the inheritance clear, and then yeah, we'll have enough to start fresh wherever we want. Brittany, what about Naomi? Trevor, what about her? She'll be fine. Her daddy's money will comfort her. The messages were dated from 4 weeks ago. Naomi handed the phone to Denise without a word. She watched her sister's face turn red, watched Marcus's jaw clench. I want to destroy him, Naomi said quietly. I want to take everything from him. Everything he thought he'd get. Everything he hoped for. Everything he planned. I want him to regret the day he ever thought he could use my father's death as a payday. Denise looked at her younger sister with something like pride. Then that's exactly what we'll do. Marcus nodded slowly. The will reading is next week. Let's see what the situation actually is before we make any moves. But Naomi, you need to be prepared for whatever's in that will. If there's less than Trevor expects, we can use that. If there's more, we need to protect it. I don't care about the money, Naomi said. I care about making sure he doesn't get a single penny. Oh honey, Denise said, squeezing her hand. By the time we're done with him, he's going to wish he'd never met you. Naomi looked around her father's study at the books he'd loved, the photos of their family on the walls, the achievements and certificates that marked his life's work. Robert Morrison had built himself from nothing. He taught her to be strong, to be smart, to never let anyone take advantage of her. She picked up the divorce papers and read them again, this time without tears, without shock. This time she read them like the business documents they were. And she saw all the holes in Trevor's story, all the lies he'd told, all the assumptions he'd made. I'll fight him, she said. And I'll win. The law office of Patterson and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise. Naomi sat in the conference room, flanked by Denise and Marcus, waiting for her father's attorney to arrive. The room smelled of expensive leather and old money, the kind of place that made promises about protecting legacies and securing futures. Richard Patterson entered with a worn briefcase and a sad smile. He'd been her father's attorney for 20 years, had drafted every contract and handled every legal matter for Morrison Industries. He looked older than Naomi remembered, the week since her father's death having carved deeper lines into his face. Naomi, he said, taking her hand in both of his. I'm so deeply sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man, one of the best clients I ever had. More than that, he was a friend. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Please call me Richard. We're going to be working together quite a bit in the coming months. He settled into his chair and opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. I'll be honest with you from the start. Your father's affairs are complicated. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. Complicated how? Richard spread several documents across the conference table. Your father's will is straightforward. Everything goes to you. The house, his personal effects, his stake in Morrison Industries and several investment accounts. However, the execution of that will is where things get complex. Because of the business struggles? Naomi asked. Richard looked surprised. He told you? About 3 months ago. He said things were tight, that he'd made some bad investments. That's putting it mildly, I'm afraid. Richard pulled out a financial statement. Morrison Industries is currently $2 million in debt. The company has been hemorrhaging money for the past 3 years due to several failed expansion attempts and some unfortunate contracts that fell through. Denise inhaled sharply. Marcus leaned forward, studying the numbers. 2 million. Naomi repeated. The company itself is worth approximately 3 million in assets. The building, equipment, intellectual property, existing contracts. But with the debt factored in, the net value is roughly 1 million. And that's if we can keep the company operational long enough to sell it or turn it around. Naomi's mind raced. Trevor thought she was inheriting a fortune. Instead, she was inheriting debt and a failing company. What about his other assets? Marcus asked. The house investments? The house has a mortgage of $300,000 remaining. It's worth about $500,000 in the current market, so that's $200,000 in equity. The investment accounts were liquidated over the past year to try to keep the company afloat. There's about $50,000 left in various savings accounts. So total, she's looking at maybe 1.2 million in assets, Marcus calculated, minus whatever debts and final expenses need to be paid. Roughly $1 million, yes, Richard confirmed. It's not nothing, but it's nowhere near what I think some people were expecting. Trevor? Naomi said flatly. You mean Trevor? Richard's expression remained professional, but she caught the flicker of distaste in his eyes. I was served with a copy of the divorce petition. I have to say the timing is unfortunate. Unfortunate, Denise muttered. That's one word for it. However, Richard continued, pulling out another document, there's something else. Something your father made me promise not to reveal until after the will reading, but I think you need to know now, given the circumstances. Naomi straightened in her chair. Richard slid a document across to her. Your father set up a trust fund 15 years ago when Morrison Industries was at its peak. The trust is held separately from the company and his personal assets. It was designed to be protected from business failures or lawsuits. How much? Marcus asked. $30 million. The room fell silent. Naomi stared at the number on the page, certain she'd misread it. 30 million, she whispered. It's invested conservatively, managed by a separate firm. Your father never touched it even when the company was struggling. He wanted to make sure you always had something, no matter what happened to him or the business. Why didn't he use it to save the company? Naomi asked. He couldn't. The trust has very specific terms. Richard pointed to a clause in the document. The money can only be released to you under certain conditions. First, Robert had to be deceased. Second, you had to make a genuine attempt to save Morrison Industries. If you can make the company profitable within 2 years of his death, the full trust transfers to you free and clear. And if she can't? Denise asked. If the company fails or is sold at a loss, the trust goes to charity. All 30 million. Naomi felt like the air had been sucked from the room. He wanted me to prove I could do it. He wanted me to earn it. Your father believed in you, Richard said gently. He told me so many times. He said you had the mind and the heart to rebuild what he'd lost. But he also wanted to make sure the money would do good in the world if things didn't work out. Hence the charity clause. Marcus was reading the trust document carefully. This was set up 15 years ago. Long before Trevor came into the picture. Yes. Your father was very deliberate about protecting this fund. It's completely separate from his estate, which means it won't go through probate and can't be touched by creditors or divorce proceedings. Trevor doesn't know about this, Naomi said. No one knew except your father and myself. Not even the company board. Robert was very clear that this information was to remain confidential until after his death. So Trevor filed for divorce thinking I was getting maybe $1 million or $2 million from the estate, Naomi said slowly. He has no idea about the 30 million. And he can't touch it anyway, Marcus added. Even if he knew. The trust terms are ironclad. It only goes to Naomi, and only if she meets the conditions. Denise was grinning now. So he's going to fight for half of a struggling business and some equity in a house. That's what he's getting. If he gets anything at all, Richard said. Given the timing of the divorce filing and some of the claims he's making, You have grounds to contest his share of the marital assets. Especially if we can prove he knew about your father's condition and deliberately waited to file. Naomi thought about the text messages, the photo of Trevor and Brittany, the timeline that showed his calculated patience. I can prove it. Richard nodded. Then I suggest we respond to his divorce petition aggressively. Make it clear you're not going to roll over. In the meantime, you need to decide what you want to do about Morrison Industries. I want to save it, Naomi said without hesitation. It won't be easy, Richard warned. The company is bleeding money. You'll need to make major changes, probably let some people go, renegotiate contracts. You'll be working 60, 70-hour weeks. I don't care. My father built that company. I'm not going to let it die just because he made some bad decisions at the end. Marcus touched her arm. Naomi, think about this. You could just let the company fold, take the $1 million from the estate and walk away. You'd still be fine. The trust money goes to charity, but you'd have enough to start over. No. Naomi's voice was firm. I'm going to make that company profitable. I'm going to meet the trust conditions. And I'm going to make sure Trevor doesn't get one penny of anything. That's a tall order, Richard said. I know. But I'm my father's daughter. He believed I could do it, so I will. Richard studied her for a long moment, then smiled. Robert said you'd say that. He told me, when Naomi sets her mind to something, heaven help anyone who gets in her way. Tears pricked Naomi's eyes, but she blinked them back. When can I start with the company? The will has to clear probate, which will take about 60 days. But I can arrange for you to take an advisory role immediately. The current CEO is Richard Morrison's old partner, Frank Webster. He's been trying to keep things together, but he's overwhelmed. I'll meet with him tomorrow, Naomi said. There's one more thing. Richard pulled out a final document. Your father left you a letter. He asked me to give it to you privately, but given everything that's happening, I think you should read it now. He handed her an envelope with her name written in her father's distinctive handwriting. Naomi's hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, written in the last days of her father's life. Through the formal language and the father-daughter love, one theme came through clearly. He knew she could do this. He believed in her. And he wanted her to believe in herself. The last paragraph made her catch her breath. Naomi, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to guide you through what comes next. But I know you don't need me anymore. You're stronger than you think, smarter than you believe, and capable of more than you imagine. Don't let anyone make you small. Don't let anyone take what's yours. And whatever you do, don't let fear stop you from becoming who you're meant to be. I love you always. Build something beautiful from the ashes I left behind. I know you can. You're my greatest achievement, and I'm so proud of you. Dad. Naomi folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. When she looked up, her eyes were dry but determined. What do I need to do first? Richard smiled. First, we respond to Trevor's divorce petition. Then we go save your father's company. And then, when all is said and done, you collect your $30 million and live your best life. Sounds like a plan, Naomi said. As they left the law office, Denise linked her arm through Naomi's. You know Trevor is going to lose his mind when he realizes there's no big payday coming. Good, Naomi said. Let him suffer. Marcus called out from behind them. I'm going to need all the evidence you have about Trevor's affair and his planning. Text messages, emails, anything that shows he was waiting for your father to die. I'll send you everything tonight, Naomi promised. As they rode the elevator down, Naomi thought about Trevor sitting in whatever apartment he'd rented with Brittany, counting money that didn't exist, planning a future that would never happen. She thought about him checking his phone, waiting for news of the will, reading, expecting to hear about millions. Instead, he was going to discover he'd destroyed his marriage for nothing. And Naomi was going to make sure he knew it. Morrison Industries occupied a low-rise building in the industrial district, surrounded by warehouses and distribution centers. Naomi pulled into the parking lot at 7 in the morning, an hour before the official workday started. She wanted to see the place when it was quiet, before the employees arrived and started performing for the boss's daughter. The building looked tired. Paint peeled from the window frames and several lights in the parking lot were burned out. The sign reading Morrison Industries Manufacturing Excellence since 1985 had faded to a dull gray. It was like looking at a photograph of something that used to be vibrant. She used the key Richard had given her to enter through the main door. The lobby was dark, the reception desk empty. Naomi flipped on the lights and looked around. The walls were covered with photos from the company's Better Days ribbon-cutting ceremonies, contract signings, her father shaking hands with clients and partners. In every photo her father was smiling. "Can I help you?" Naomi turned to find a man in his 60s standing in the doorway to the offices. He wore a wrinkled shirt and held a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Boss." His hair was gray and thinning, and he had the exhausted look of someone who'd been fighting a losing battle for too long. "Frank Webster?" Naomi asked. "That's me. And you must be Naomi. Richard said you might come by early." He walked over and shook her hand. "I'm sorry about your father. Robert was the best partner I ever had." "Thank you. How long have you two worked together?" 23 years. I was employee number 5, back when the company was just Robert and 4 guys in a rented garage. Watched him build all this from nothing." Frank gestured around the lobby. "And now I'm watching it fall apart. Not exactly the legacy either of us wanted." "Richard told me about the financial situation." Frank sighed. "Did he tell you how bad it really is? Because the numbers on paper don't capture the full picture. We're 60 days away from missing payroll. Our biggest client is threatening to pull out because we've been late on our last 3 deliveries. The bank is calling twice a week about the line of credit. And morale is in the toilet because everyone knows we're sinking." "Why didn't my father tell me it was this bad?" "Pride mostly. You know how Robert was. He thought he could fix it himself. Kept saying he just needed one good contract, one big deal, and everything would turn around." Frank took a sip of his coffee. "The problem is he was chasing the wrong deals. Trying to expand into markets we didn't understand, taking on projects that were too big for our capacity. The company got stretched too thin." Naomi walked over to one of the photos on the wall. It showed her father at the company's 20th anniversary party, surrounded by employees. Everyone looked happy, successful, secure. "What went wrong?" she asked. Frank joined her at the photo. "About 4 years ago, Robert got it in his head that we needed to go national. We'd always been a regional manufacturer serving the tri-state area, and we were good at it. But he wanted more. He wanted to build an empire. So he expanded too fast. He borrowed too much, hired too many people, took on contracts we couldn't handle. And when those contracts fell through, we were left holding the debt and the overhead." Frank paused. "There's something else. Something I probably should have told the lawyers, but I was hoping to fix it myself." Naomi turned to face him. "What?" "The company has a silent partner. Well, silent investor. He put in $500,000 3 years ago when we were desperate for capital. In exchange, he got 10% of the company and a seat on the board." "Who?" "His name is Gerald Fletcher. He's Trevor's uncle." The name hit Naomi like a physical blow. "Trevor's uncle is invested in my father's company?" Robert didn't know about the Trevor connection at first. Gerald presented himself as an independent investor, and we were too desperate to look too closely. By the time Robert found out Gerald was related to Trevor, the money was already invested and the papers were signed. "When did my father find out?" "About a year ago. He was angry, felt betrayed. But there was nothing he could do without buying Gerald out, and we didn't have the cash." Frank looked uncomfortable. "There's more. Gerald has been pushing for the company to declare bankruptcy. He says it's the only way to resolve the debt situation. Let me guess, if the company goes bankrupt, he gets to buy the assets for pennies on the dollar." "Exactly. And Robert suspected Gerald was sabotaging things to make bankruptcy more likely. Contracts mysteriously falling through, suppliers suddenly demanding cash up front, that sort of thing. But he couldn't prove it." Naomi's mind was racing. Trevor's divorce timing made even more sense now. He hadn't just been waiting for her father to die. He'd been coordinating with his uncle, making sure the company would fail so they could swoop in and buy it cheap, then flip it for profit. "Where does Gerald live?" Naomi asked. "He's based in Philadelphia. He's some kind of investment consultant, buys up struggling companies and turns them around. Or runs them into the ground, depending on who you ask. I want to see the company books. Everything. Every contract, every debt, every asset. I want to know exactly where we stand." Frank raised an eyebrow. "You're serious about trying to save this place?" "Dead serious. My father believed this company was worth saving, and so do I. It's going to take a miracle, Naomi. We're not just in trouble, we're drowning. You'd have to cut costs, renegotiate every major contract, probably lay off a third of the workforce, and somehow convince our clients not to jump ship in the meantime. Then that's what I'll do." Frank studied her for a long moment. "You've got Robert's stubbornness. That might be enough." He set down his coffee mug. "All right, let me show you the books. But I'm warning you, it's ugly." They spent the next 3 hours going through the company's financials. Frank was right, it was ugly. The debt was worse than Richard had indicated, the contracts were bleeding money, and the overhead was astronomical. Morrison Industries was paying for office space they didn't need, equipment they rarely used, and employees whose positions had become redundant. But as Naomi dug deeper, she started to see the shape of a solution. The company's core business, manufacturing custom metal parts for construction and industrial clients, was still profitable. It was all the expansion attempts, the diversification projects, the ill-advised ventures into new markets that were losing money. What if we went back to basics? She asked Frank. Cut all the expansion projects, focus only on what we're good at? We'd have to lay off about 20 people. Cancel contracts, which would cost us penalty fees. And we'd lose the Philadelphia office entirely. That whole division is based on the expansion projects. How much would we save annually? Frank did some quick calculations. Probably $800,000 a year in direct costs. But we'd also lose about $300,000 in revenue from those projects. So net savings of $500,000. Roughly. But that still leaves us with $1.5 million in existing debt to deal with. Naomi thought about the $30 million trust. She couldn't touch that money unless she made the company profitable. But if she could just get the company stable, prove to Richard and the trust terms that Morrison Industries was viable, then the money would be hers. What about Gerald Fletcher? She asked. How do we handle him? He's going to fight you every step of the way. He wants bankruptcy, and as a board member, he can make things difficult. Can we buy him out? With what money? We're broke. Naomi tapped her fingers on the desk, thinking. What if we could prove he's been sabotaging the company? Would that void his investment? Frank's eyes widened. If we could prove fraud or breach of fiduciary duty, yes. But that's a big if. My father suspected he was sabotaging things. That means there's probably evidence somewhere. We just need to find it. Even if we found evidence, going after Gerald means going up against a guy with deep pockets and a team of lawyers. It would be expensive and time-consuming. I don't care. If he's been deliberately destroying my father's company, I want him out. Frank smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. You really are Robert's daughter. Employees started arriving at 8 o'clock. Naomi met them in the break room, introducing herself and explaining that she'd be taking an active role in the company's management. The reactions were mixed. Some seemed hopeful, others skeptical, and a few openly worried about layoffs. I'm not going to lie to you, Naomi told the assembled group. The company is in trouble. My father made some decisions that didn't work out, and now we're paying the price. But I believe this company can survive. I believe we can turn things around. It's going to require changes, and not everyone is going to like those changes. But the alternative is watching this place close down completely. Are you planning layoffs? A woman in the back asked. Probably. I'm still reviewing all the options, but yes, we'll likely need to reduce staff. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Naomi raised her hand for quiet. I know that's scary. But I'd rather be honest with you than pretend everything is fine. If you're going to lose your job, you deserve to know it's coming so you can plan accordingly. I'll give everyone as much notice as possible, and I'll provide severance packages for anyone who's let go. That's more than you'd get if we just went bankrupt. A man in a company shirt spoke up. What makes you think you can fix this? No offense, but you've never run a company before. You're right, I haven't. But I've watched my father run this company my whole life. I've worked here every summer since I was 16. I know the business, I know the clients, and I know what we're capable of when we're focused. My father lost his way trying to build something too big. I'm going to bring us back to what we do best. And if that doesn't work? Another employee asked. Then at least we'll know we tried. My father built this company from nothing. I owe it to him and to all of you to fight for it. But I can't do this alone. I need everyone who stays to be committed, to work hard, and to believe this is possible. If you can't do that, I understand. But if you can, then let's save Morrison Industries together. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. It wasn't overwhelming applause, but it was something. It was a start. After the meeting, Frank pulled her aside. That was good. You gave them hope without making promises you can't keep. Do you think we can actually do this? Naomi asked. Ask me again in 6 months. But for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm steering a sinking ship alone. Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Trevor's attorney wants to schedule a settlement conference. They're pushing for quick resolution. Call me. She stared at the message, thinking about Trevor sitting somewhere with Brittany, probably still confident he'd get his payoff. He had no idea the company was broke. No idea about the trust fund. No idea that his uncle's sabotage had actually worked against his own interests. "Let him wait," she muttered, shoving the phone back in her pocket. Frank raised an eyebrow. "Problem?" "Just my soon-to-be ex-husband trying to claim money that doesn't exist." "Ah, Richard mentioned you were going through a divorce. Trevor filed the day of my father's funeral. He thinks he's entitled to half of my inheritance." Frank's expression darkened. "That's low. Even for Gerald's nephew." "Wait, Trevor told you about being Gerald's nephew?" "No, Gerald mentioned it once when he was drunk at a board meeting. Seemed proud of it, like he'd gotten his nephew placed well by marrying him off to Robert's daughter." Naomi felt cold. "He set us up?" "I don't know if it went that far, but it wouldn't surprise me. Gerald's the kind of guy who's always working an angle. I need to prove that. I need to prove Trevor and Gerald were working together from the start. If they were, there'll be a paper trail. Money, emails, something. Gerald's smart, but he's also arrogant. He probably didn't cover his tracks as well as he thinks." Naomi looked around the office, at the employees getting back to work, at the photos of her father's proudest moments. Trevor and Gerald thought they could destroy this place and profit from the ruins. They thought Naomi would be too grief-stricken, too overwhelmed, too naive to fight back. They were wrong. "Frank, how do you feel about doing some detective work?" "I feel like it's about time someone held Gerald accountable." "What did you have in mind?" "I want access to every email, every memo, every document that has Gerald's name on it. I want phone records, meeting minutes, expense reports. Everything. If he's been sabotaging this company, he left evidence somewhere. That's going to take time." "We have time. Trevor's divorce won't finalize for months. The company restructuring will take at least that long. And Gerald doesn't know I'm onto him yet. We have the element of surprise." Frank smiled, a real smile this time. "Robert always said you were the smart one in the family. I'm starting to see what he meant." As Naomi left the building that evening, she felt exhausted but energized. She had a plan now. Save the company, expose Gerald and Trevor's conspiracy, win the divorce and collect the $30 million. It was ambitious, maybe impossible. But her father had believed she could do it. And she was beginning to believe it too. 6 weeks after her father's funeral, Naomi moved into a small office at Morrison Industries. It wasn't much, just a desk, a computer, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot, but it was hers. She arrived every morning at 6 and left after 8 at night, diving into the company's operations with an intensity that surprised even herself. The restructuring was brutal. She spent the first week meeting with every department head, analyzing every cost, questioning every expense. Frank had been right about the bloat. The company was paying for services they didn't need, maintaining contracts that lost money, and employing people whose jobs had become redundant as the business shrank. The layoffs came in week 3. Naomi personally met with each person being let go, explaining the situation and providing 2 months severance, more than the company could afford, but she insisted. These weren't faceless numbers on a spreadsheet. They were people with families, mortgages, lives that would be disrupted by her decisions. "I'm sorry," she told each one. "If there was any other way, I'd take it. But the company is bleeding money, and if I don't stop it now, everyone loses their job." Some understood. Others were angry. One man told her she was just like all rich people, cutting costs while protecting her own interests. She let him vent, then wrote him a personal check for an extra month's salary from her own savings. "I'm not doing this to get rich," she told him quietly. "I'm doing this to save what my father built. I know you don't believe that right now, and that's okay. But I hope someday you'll understand." He took the check and left without another word. By week 5, the company had shed its excess weight. 22 people laid off. The Philadelphia office closed. 3 major expansion projects canceled, with penalty fees paid from the sale of unused equipment. The company's annual operating budget had been cut by $750,000. But the debt remained and clients were still nervous. Naomi spent her days meeting with Morrison Industries' biggest customers, reassuring them that the company was stable, showing them the restructuring plan, promising reliability and quality. "Your father was a good man," one client told her. "But the last year things slipped. Deliveries were late, quality control wasn't what it used to be. We've been looking at other suppliers." "I know," Naomi said. "And I don't blame you. But that's over now. We're back to basics, focused on what we do best. Give us one more chance. If we miss a deadline or the quality isn't perfect, I'll personally refund your entire order." "You can't afford that." "Then I guess we better not miss any deadlines." The client studied her for a long moment, then nodded. One chance. But I'm holding you to that refund promise. I wouldn't expect anything less. She made the same promise to 5 other major clients. It was a huge risk. One mistake would cost the company money it didn't have, but it worked. 4 of the 5 agreed to stay. The 5th was already committed to another supplier, but promised to consider Morrison Industries for future projects. The wins were small, but they added up. By week 7, the company's cash flow started to stabilize. They weren't profitable yet, but the hemorrhaging had stopped. Naomi could see the path forward now, could imagine the company not just surviving but thriving. Then Gerald Fletcher called a board meeting. The boardroom at Morrison Industries hadn't been used in months. Naomi arrived early to find Frank already there, looking tense. "He's bringing his lawyer," Frank said quietly. "And he's demanding a vote on bankruptcy." "He can't force that, can he?" "He can make the case. If the other board members agree, they can override you. You only have 49% of the voting shares right now. Once probate clears and you inherit your father's full stake, you'll have majority control. But until then, you're vulnerable." "Who else is on the board?" "Besides you, me, and Gerald, there's Howard Chin from accounting and Patricia Mills from operations. They're good people, but they're scared. If Gerald makes a convincing argument that bankruptcy is the only option, they might vote with him." Naomi took a deep breath. "Then I need to make a better argument." Gerald Fletcher arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, flanked by a lawyer in an expensive suit. Gerald was a large man in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of fake tan that came from spray bottles rather than sunshine. He wore designer clothes and too much cologne, and when he shook Naomi's hand, his grip was deliberately too firm. "Naomi, so good to finally meet you properly. I was sorry to miss your father's funeral. Business in Dubai, you understand." "Of course," Naomi said, her voice neutral. Gerald took a seat at the head of the table as if he owned the place. His lawyer sat beside him, opening a briefcase full of documents. Howard and Patricia arrived together, looking uncomfortable. They greeted Naomi warmly but kept their distance from Gerald, which Naomi noted. "Let's get started," Gerald said once everyone was seated. "I've called this meeting because I believe Morrison Industries has reached a critical juncture. We've all seen the financials. We're $2 million in debt, our client base is shrinking, and the restructuring, while admirable in its intention, hasn't addressed the fundamental problem." "Which is?" Naomi asked. "The company is no longer viable as currently structured. The market has moved on. Our competitors have better technology, lower overhead, and stronger client relationships. We're trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon." "The restructuring has only been in place for 7 weeks, Frank protested. "You can't expect immediate results." "I don't expect results at all," Gerald said flatly, "because the situation is hopeless. Which is why I'm proposing we file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. It's the only way to preserve any value for the stakeholders." "You mean it's the only way for you to buy the company's assets cheap?" Naomi said. Gerald's expression didn't change. "I mean it's the only way to resolve the debt situation in an orderly fashion. Bankruptcy would allow us to renegotiate with creditors, restructure the business, and potentially emerge stronger. Or it would allow you to acquire the company's assets for a fraction of their value, flip them for profit, and walk away rich while everyone else loses their jobs." "That's a serious accusation," Gerald's lawyer interjected. "Do you have any evidence to support that claim?" "Not yet," Naomi admitted. "But I'm working on it." Gerald smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Naomi, I understand you're emotional. You've just lost your father, you're going through a divorce, and now you're trying to save a business you barely understand. It's admirable. But emotion isn't a business strategy. Neither is sabotage," Naomi shot back. The room went quiet. Gerald's smile disappeared. "Excuse me? You heard me. I think you've been deliberately sabotaging this company for the past year. Pushing suppliers to demand cash up front, spreading rumors about our financial stability, maybe even interfering with contracts. All to drive us toward bankruptcy so you can swoop in and profit." Gerald's lawyer started to speak, but Gerald held up a hand. "That's absurd. I've invested $500,000 in this company. Why would I want it to fail? Because $500,000 gets you 10% of nothing if the company survives. But if it goes bankrupt, you can buy the whole thing for pennies on the dollar. That's how vulture investing works, isn't it?" "This is slander," the lawyer said. "If you continue making these accusations without evidence." "Then what?" Naomi leaned forward. "You'll sue me? Go ahead. Discovery in that lawsuit would be very interesting, I'm sure." Gerald's jaw tightened. I came here to discuss a serious business proposal, not to be accused of crimes by a grieving daughter playing businesswoman. And I'm here to protect my father's company from someone who's been trying to destroy it since day one. Howard cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should all take a step back. Gerald, you've proposed bankruptcy. Naomi, you've proposed continuing the restructuring. Let's hear both sides fully before making any decisions. The numbers speak for themselves, Gerald said. He nodded to his lawyer, who began distributing packets of financial analysis. Even with the restructuring, Morrison Industries is projected to lose another $300,000 this year. The debt service alone consumes most of our profit margin. Without major capital investment, which none of us can provide, the company will fail within 18 months. That's based on current client retention rates, Naomi countered. But I've been meeting with our major clients. 4 of our 5 biggest customers have committed to staying with us. That changes the revenue projections significantly. Verbal commitments aren't contracts, Gerald said. Neither are your bankruptcy projections. Naomi pulled out her own set of documents, one she and Frank had prepared the night before. Here's an alternative scenario. If we maintain our current cost structure and retain 80% of our client base, the company breaks even in 6 months and becomes profitable within a year. That's without any new business, just keeping what we have. Patricia was studying both sets of numbers. These are very different projections based on the same data. Because we're making different assumptions, Naomi explained. Gerald assumes the company continues to decline. I'm working to make sure it doesn't. Hope isn't a business strategy, Gerald repeated. Neither is giving up, Naomi said. My father built this company over 30 years. He survived 2 recessions, multiple market downturns, and countless challenges. The last few years were rough, yes. But the core business is still solid. We're still good at what we do. We just need time to prove it. Time we don't have, Gerald insisted. Every month we delay bankruptcy, we're burning through cash that could be preserved for creditors and stakeholders. What Gerald isn't telling you, Frank interjected, is that he's been shopping for buyers. I got a call last week from a private equity firm asking about acquiring Morrison Industries assets. When I asked how they heard we might be for sale, they mentioned Gerald's name. Gerald's lawyer jumped in immediately. My client has every right to explore options for protecting his investment, while simultaneously pushing for bankruptcy and undermining the company's stability, Naomi added. That's a conflict of interest. It's prudent planning, Gerald said coldly. If the company is going to fail anyway, why not make sure we get the best price for the assets? Because the company isn't going to fail, Naomi said. Not if you get out of the way and let me do my job. Howard and Patricia exchanged glances. They'd been silent through most of the argument, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. I need to think about this, Howard said finally. These are big decisions. I don't want to vote today. Neither do I, Patricia agreed. Can we table the bankruptcy discussion for 60 days? That gives Naomi time to show us results from the restructuring. 60 days is too long, Gerald protested. The company could be insolvent by then. Actually, we have sufficient cash reserves for at least 90 days, Frank said. I've been managing the accounts carefully. We're not in immediate danger. I support Patricia's suggestion, Naomi said. Give me 60 days. If the company hasn't shown significant improvement by then, I'll support a bankruptcy filing myself. And if you're wrong? Gerald asked. If the company crashes in the meantime and there's nothing left to salvage? Then I'll take full responsibility. But I don't think that's going to happen. Howard nodded slowly. 60 days seems reasonable. Patricia? I agree. Gerald looked furious, but he was outvoted. Fine. 60 days. But I'm putting it on record that I believe this is a mistake. When this company collapses, remember that I tried to save what value remained. Noted, Naomi said. The meeting broke up shortly after. Gerald and his lawyer left without another word. Howard and Patricia lingered to talk to Naomi. You know he's not going to give up, right? Patricia said. He'll fight you every step of the way. I know. But I've got 60 days to prove him wrong. That's all I need. I hope you're right, Howard said. For all our sakes. After they left, Frank poured himself a glass of water with shaking hands. That was intense. That was just the opening round, Naomi said. Gerald's going to escalate. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure Morrison Industries succeeds. And then I'm going to find proof that Gerald's been sabotaging us. Because I know he has been. He's too confident about bankruptcy, too prepared with his alternative plans. He's been working toward this for months, maybe longer. You really think Trevor was part of it from the beginning? I think Gerald told Trevor to marry me. I think the whole relationship was a setup to get access to my father's company and his assets. And when Dad got sick, they saw their chance to cash in. That's diabolical. That's family, Naomi said bitterly. But they made one mistake. They underestimated me. Her phone rang. Richard Patterson. Naomi, we need to talk about the divorce settlement conference. Trevor's attorney is getting aggressive. What are they asking for now? Half of everything in your father's estate, plus half of Morrison Industries, plus alimony for 5 years. Naomi laughed, a harsh sound. Tell them to pound sand. That's essentially what I said in more professional terms. But they're threatening to drag this out, make it ugly? Let them. I've got nothing to hide. Can they say the same? I've started investigating Trevor's relationship with Brittany. The timeline you provided is helpful, but I need more. Bank records, credit card statements, anything showing he was spending money on her before he filed for divorce. I'll get you everything. But Richard, there's something else. I think Trevor's uncle Gerald has been sabotaging Morrison Industries. If I can prove that, does it affect the divorce? If you can prove Trevor knew about it and was cooperating with his uncle, yes. It would show intent to defraud you. But that's a high bar to clear. I'll clear it. Just give me time. After she hung up, Naomi sat in the empty boardroom for a long time, thinking about everything she needed to do. Save the company. Expose Gerald and Trevor. Win the divorce. Collect the trust fund. It was too much for one person. Too much pressure, too many moving pieces. But she didn't have a choice. This was her life now. This was her fight. And she was going to win. 3 months after her father's death, Naomi was living on coffee and determination. Morrison Industries was slowly stabilizing. The restructuring had taken hold, costs were under control, and most of their major clients had stayed. They weren't profitable yet, but they were close. The company would make it to the 60-day mark that the board had agreed on, and probably beyond. Gerald had been suspiciously quiet lately, which worried Naomi more than his active opposition would have. People like Gerald didn't give up, they just changed tactics. She was reviewing the latest financial reports when her phone rang from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Is this Naomi? A woman's voice, sharp with anger. Yes. Who's this? Brittany. Trevor's girlfriend. We need to talk. Naomi's hand tightened on the phone. I have nothing to say to you. Well, I have plenty to say to you. Trevor lied to me. About everything. About the money, about your inheritance, about what he was getting from the divorce. And I want to know what you're going to do about it. Do about it? Why would I do anything? Because he used both of us. Brittany's voice rose. He told me you were getting millions. He said once the divorce went through, we'd have enough money to travel, to buy a house, to start a life together. Instead, he's got nothing. Nothing. And I've wasted 2 years on him. Despite herself, Naomi felt a flicker of satisfaction. So you're calling me because Trevor's broke? I'm calling you because he lied. He promised me things and he can't deliver. He said he'd take care of me. He said we'd be set once your father died. The words hung in the air. Naomi grabbed her recorder, set it next to the phone. He said that? That we'd be set once my father died. That's exactly what he said. He was tracking your father's illness, watching the news about the will, counting down the days. He told me to be patient, that it would all be worth it. And you went along with that? You knew he was using his wife's father's death as a financial opportunity? Brittany was quiet for a moment. I didn't think about it that way. He made it sound like you didn't care about him, like you were cold and distant. He said you'd be fine, that you had plenty of money. So you just believed him? Why wouldn't I? He was leaving his wife for me. That means something. It means he's a user who saw an opportunity. Yeah, well, I see that now. Brittany's anger had shifted to something closer to desperation. Look, I know you have no reason to help me. But Trevor owes me. He made promises. He got me to quit my job because he said he'd support me. I gave up my apartment to move in with him. And now he's telling me there's no money, that the divorce is taking longer than he expected, that he might not get anything at all. That's all true, Naomi said. He's not getting anything. How is that possible? You inherited your father's company. I inherited a failing company with $2 million in debt. The house has a mortgage. The savings were already spent. Trevor filed for divorce thinking he'd get millions, but there are no millions to get. He said your father was wealthy. My father was once. But he made bad investments. By the time he died, there wasn't much left. Trevor said. Brittany trailed off. He was so sure. He kept talking about the inheritance like it was guaranteed, because his Uncle Gerald told him it was. They were working together, trying to profit from my father's death. But their plan failed. There's no payday coming. His uncle. Gerald Fletcher? You know him? Trevor talks about him sometimes. Says Gerald is teaching him about business, helping him plan for the future. I thought he meant career advice. Naomi's mind raced. Brittany, I know you don't owe me anything. But if you want revenge on Trevor for lying to you, I can help with that. How? Tell me everything. Every conversation you had with Trevor about the divorce, about my father, about Gerald. Every promise he made, every plan he shared. I'm building a case against him for fraud, and your testimony would help. Why should I believe you'll help me? Because we both got used by the same man. The difference is I have the resources to make him pay for it. You want compensation for what Trevor promised? Help me prove he was planning this all along, and I'll make sure you get something from him. You do that. I do anything to make sure Trevor gets exactly what he deserves. Which is nothing. Brittany was quiet for a long moment. What do you need me to do? First, do you have any text messages or emails from Trevor talking about the inheritance or the divorce plans? Some. He usually talked about that stuff in person because he said it was sensitive. But there are a few texts. Send them to me. Every single one. Also, write down everything you remember him saying about the timeline, the money, his uncle's involvement. What if he finds out I'm talking to you? Then he finds out. What's he going to do? He's already lied to you, used you, and broken his promises. You don't owe him loyalty. I guess not. Brittany's voice had a new edge to it. You know what? He deserves this. He made me think we'd have this amazing life together. Instead, I'm 32 years old with no job, no apartment, and no money. Because I believed him. How long were you two together before he left me? We met about 2.5 years ago. But we didn't start really dating until about 1.5 years ago. He said he was going to leave you, but the timing had to be right. The timing being when my father died. Yeah. He said it would be cleaner that way, that you'd be too distracted to fight the divorce. He underestimated me. Clearly. Brittany paused. Can I ask you something? Why did you marry him? Naomi thought about the question. I thought he was kind. Supportive. I thought he loved me. He can be those things. When he wants something. He was amazing to me at first, made me feel special. But once he realized the money wasn't coming, he changed. Got mean. Started blaming me for things. Said I was too needy, too demanding. He's a manipulator. He tells people what they want to hear until he doesn't need them anymore. Yeah. Brittany's voice cracked. I really believed him. I thought we were going to have this incredible life. I'm such an idiot. Despite everything, Naomi felt a twinge of sympathy. Brittany had been used to, just in a different way. You're not an idiot. You just trusted the wrong person. We both did. The difference is I'm going to make sure he pays for it. Brittany sent the text messages an hour later. They were damning. Trevor talking about the inheritance, about timing the divorce, about his uncle's advice on claiming marital assets. One message in particular made Naomi's blood run cold. Trevor, Gerald says we need to wait until after the old man dies. If we file before, Naomi might get suspicious and hide assets. But once he's gone and she inherits, we can claim half of everything. Just be patient, baby. It'll all be worth it. Brittany, I hate waiting. I want to be with you now. Trevor, soon. I promise. By next year we'll be rich and free. You, me, and all that inheritance money. Naomi forwarded everything to Richard Patterson with a note. Evidence of premeditation. Trevor was planning this with his mistress and his uncle before my father died. Richard called back within 10 minutes. This is exactly what we needed. With these messages and Brittany's testimony, we can prove Trevor's divorce filing was part of a deliberate fraud scheme. He won't get a penny. Good. What about the alimony he's asking for? With this evidence? Not a chance. In fact, we might be able to go after him for attempted fraud. Make him pay your legal fees. Do it. There's something else. I've been looking into Gerald Fletcher's business dealings. He's got a pattern of investing in struggling companies, pushing them toward bankruptcy, then buying them cheap through shell corporations. He's done it at least 4 times in the past decade. Can we prove he's doing the same thing to Morrison Industries? Not yet. But if we can show a pattern of behavior, it strengthens your case against him. I'm working on getting financial records from his previous deals. After hanging up with Richard, Naomi sat back in her chair thinking about Brittany. The woman had called looking for revenge and Naomi had given her a path to it. But there was no satisfaction in it. Brittany had been used just like Naomi. Trevor had lied to both of them, made promises he never intended to keep. The real enemy wasn't Brittany. It was Trevor and Gerald who'd orchestrated this whole thing. 2 days later, Naomi got another call from Brittany. Trevor kicked me out, she said without preamble. Said I was causing too much stress, that he needed space to deal with the divorce. He gave me $100 and told me to find somewhere else to live. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm done with him. I called a lawyer like you suggested. He says I can sue Trevor for fraud, since he made me quit my job based on promises he couldn't keep. Good. Trevor's going to freak out when he realizes both of us are coming after him. Let him freak out. He earned it. Thanks, Naomi, for helping me see clearly. I know I helped break up your marriage. I'm not proud of that. My marriage was already broken. Trevor broke it when he decided to use me for money. You were just the symptom, not the disease. After Brittany hung up, Naomi returned to work on the Morrison Industries finances. The company had hit a milestone that morning. They were officially operating in the black, at least for the current month. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Frank popped his head into her office. Did you see the numbers? We're profitable. For 1 month, Naomi cautioned. We need to sustain it. We will. The new contracts are solid, the clients are happy, and morale is actually improving. People believe again. What about Gerald? Haven't heard from him in 3 weeks. I think he's plotting something. Probably. But we've got momentum now. Whatever he throws at us, we can handle it. That night, Naomi allowed herself a small celebration. She bought a decent bottle of wine and drank a glass while looking over the company financials. Morrison Industries wasn't saved yet, but it was on the path to survival. Trevor had tried to profit from her father's death. Gerald had tried to sabotage her father's company. Brittany had helped Trevor plan his betrayal. But Naomi was still standing. Still fighting. Still winning. And she was just getting started. 4 months into running Morrison Industries, Naomi had developed a routine. Arrive at 6, leave at 8, spend weekends reviewing files and planning strategy. Her apartment, the small place she'd rented after leaving the house she'd shared with Trevor, had become a secondary office, its walls covered with timelines and documents. She was building 2 cases simultaneously. One against Trevor in the divorce, one against Gerald at the company. Both men had underestimated her. Both were about to learn their mistake. Frank had become her ally in investigating Gerald. Together, they'd spent weeks going through company emails, meeting records, and financial documents. The pattern was there if you knew where to look, subtle acts of sabotage disguised as business decisions. Look at this, Frank said one morning, spreading 3 documents across Naomi's desk. These are contracts that fell through last year. Your father was convinced we'd lost them due to pricing issues. But, Naomi prompted. But I found emails between Gerald and the clients. He was bad-mouthing the company, suggesting we were on the verge of collapse, telling them to take their business elsewhere. Naomi read the emails carefully. They were subtle. Gerald never outright lied. Instead, he asked leading questions. Given Morrison Industries' recent financial difficulties, do you feel confident in their ability to deliver on time? And, I'm concerned about the company's stability. Have you considered backup suppliers? He was planting seeds of doubt, Naomi said. Exactly. And it worked. 3 major contracts pulled out within weeks of Gerald raising these concerns. Why would he want contracts to fail if he was invested in the company? Because failed contracts meant mounting debt, which meant the company would need to either take on more investors, giving him more control, or declare bankruptcy, which we now know was his end goal. Naomi added the emails to her growing file of evidence. What else have you found? This is bigger. Frank pulled out a financial document. Gerald's investment of $500,000? It came through a company called Fletcher Holdings LLC. I did some digging. Fletcher Holdings has a history of investing in struggling companies right before they collapse. Let me guess, then Gerald buys them cheap in bankruptcy? Exactly. He's done it 4 times. Invest just enough to get board control, sabotage operations, force bankruptcy, buy the assets through a shell company, flip them for profit. It's a whole business model. Can we prove he's doing the same thing here? Not definitively yet. But I found something interesting in the company's supplier contracts. About 6 months ago, several of our long-term suppliers suddenly demanded cash up front instead of the usual 30-day terms. It put a massive strain on our cash flow. Let me guess, Gerald recommended those suppliers? His name is on the approval documents for 3 of them. And get this, all 3 suppliers have a common owner. A company called Great Lakes Distribution. Let me guess, connected to Gerald? Not directly. But Great Lakes Distribution is owned by a holding company, which is owned by another holding company, which, if you follow the chain far enough, connects back to Gerald's business partner, a guy named Richard Bronson. Naomi leaned back in her chair. So Gerald got his business partner's companies designated as suppliers, then had them demand cash up front, which destroyed our cash flow, which pushed us toward bankruptcy. That's my theory. But proving it in court is going to be tough. The connections are deliberately obscured. What about Trevor? Any evidence he was coordinating with Gerald? Frank pulled out another document, this one a series of text messages. I got these from Trevor's old work phone. He forgot to return it when he quit last year and I kept it in storage. Look at the message thread between Trevor and Gerald from about 18 months ago. Naomi read the messages, her anger building with each line. Gerald, how's the home front? She suspect anything? Trevor, Naomi's clueless. She thinks I actually care about her father's company. I just smile and nod while he drones on about business. Gerald, good. Keep her comfortable. Once the old man kicks it, we make our move. Trevor, you're sure there's money coming? Gerald, I've seen the company valuation. Plus whatever else Robert has stashed away. Could be 3-4 million easy. Your cut would be substantial. Trevor, and then I can finally dump Naomi and go public with Brittany. Gerald, Patient's nephew. Everything in its time. Naomi's hands shook as she set down the phone. Trevor knew. He knew about Gerald's plan to sabotage the company. They were working together. It gets worse, Frank said quietly. Look at the date on those messages. Naomi checked. That's 2 weeks after my father was diagnosed with cancer. They started planning this the moment they knew Robert was terminal. They weren't just waiting for him to die, they were actively preparing to profit from his death. Naomi stood up and walked to the window, needing to move, needing to process the depth of Trevor and Gerald's betrayal. They hadn't just been opportunistic. They'd been predatory, circling her father like vultures, waiting for the moment of weakness. I want them destroyed, she said quietly. Both of them. Completely. We're getting there. But Naomi, you need to be careful. Gerald's already suspicious about why you're digging into old files. And if Trevor finds out you have those messages, what's he going to do? He's already filed for divorce. He's already exposed himself as a fraud. The worst is already happening. The worst for Trevor, maybe. But Gerald still has power here. He could call another board meeting, push harder for bankruptcy. If he convinces Howard and Patricia. He won't. Because I'm going to show them this evidence first. Let them see what kind of man Gerald really is. That could backfire. If you accuse him without rock-solid proof, he could sue for defamation. Then I'll get rock-solid proof. Naomi turned back to Frank. You said Gerald's business partner is Richard Bronson? The one connected to Great Lakes Distribution? Yeah. Why? Because Gerald's smart enough not to leave evidence lying around. But his partner might not be. If we can find proof that Bronson was working with Gerald to sabotage our suppliers, we can trace it back to Gerald. How do we get access to Bronson's files? I have a friend who works in corporate investigations. She owes me a favor. Naomi was already pulling out her phone. If Bronson has any digital footprint connecting him to Gerald's scheme, she'll find it. Frank looked worried. That's getting into legally gray territory. I'm not asking her to hack anything. Just to look at public records, business filings, anything legally accessible that might show the connection. And if she finds something? Then we take it to Richard Patterson and let him figure out the legal strategy. But I need ammunition before the next board meeting. I need to be able to prove Gerald's been sabotaging us, not just suspect it. Over the next 2 weeks, Naomi's investigator friend, Monica, dug into Richard Bronson's business dealings. What she found was a gold mine of connections and suspicious transactions. Bronson's not nearly as careful as Fletcher, Monica reported over coffee at a cafe near Naomi's office. He's got LLCs registered in 3 states, all with connections to companies that Fletcher has invested in. I found patterns of behavior. Bronson's companies become suppliers to Fletcher's target companies right before those companies fail. Can you prove coordination? Not smoking gun proof, but strong circumstantial evidence. The timing is too consistent to be coincidence. Fletcher invests, Bronson's companies become suppliers, Demands for cash up front strangle the target company's cash flow, bankruptcy follows, Fletcher buys the assets cheap. What about Morrison Industries specifically? Bronson's Great Lakes distribution became one of your suppliers 9 months ago, right after Fletcher invested. Within 3 months, they'd switched from credit to cash-only terms. Your company's cash flow problems started immediately after. But can we prove Fletcher ordered Bronson to do it? That's harder. Their communication is careful. But I did find something interesting. Monica pulled out her laptop and showed Naomi an email. This is from Bronson to Fletcher, sent 6 months ago. Look at the subject line, MI Project Status Update. Naomi read the email. It was coded, but the meaning was clear. Bronson was reporting on the project of destabilizing Morrison Industries, noting that cash flow pressures were proceeding as planned, and that target timeline for resolution was within 12 months. Mi Morrison Industries. Has to be. And resolution, in Fletcher's business model, means bankruptcy and acquisition. Is this email enough? Probably not by itself. But combined with the text messages between Trevor and Gerald, the pattern of supplier changes, and the evidence of Fletcher's past behavior with other companies, you're building a compelling case. Naomi thanked Monica and returned to the office with new purpose. She had evidence now. Not perfect, not bulletproof, but enough to raise serious questions about Gerald's intentions and actions. That evening she called Richard Patterson. I've got evidence of a conspiracy between Gerald Fletcher and Trevor to defraud Morrison Industries and me personally, she said without preamble. Can we use it in both the divorce case and to remove Gerald from the company board? Send me everything you have. If it's as strong as you say, we might be able to get Gerald removed for breach of fiduciary duty. As for Trevor, this could upgrade the divorce case to fraud charges. How long until we can move? Give me a week to review everything and build the legal strategy. But Naomi, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. When you go after men like Fletcher and Trevor, they fight back. Let them fight. I'm not backing down. I know you're not. That's what worries me. After hanging up, Naomi sat in her office, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, conspiracy, and fraud. Trevor had married her as part of a plan to profit from her father's death. Gerald had invested in her father's company specifically to destroy it. Together, they'd plotted and schemed and waited for the perfect moment to strike. But they'd made one critical error. They'd assumed Naomi would be too grief-stricken, too naive, too overwhelmed to fight back. They were wrong. And now they were going to pay for that mistake. By month 6, Morrison Industries had turned the corner. The company posted its second consecutive month of profitability, securing 3 new major contracts and retaining every existing client. Employee morale had shifted from desperate fear to cautious optimism. People started believing again. Naomi had proven her father wrong about one thing: she didn't need years to turn the company around. She needed 6 months, relentless focus, and the ability to make hard decisions without hesitation. The board meeting where she'd show her proof against Gerald was scheduled for next week. Until then, she had to keep the company running, keep the momentum going, and keep Gerald from suspecting what was coming. She was reviewing supply chain contracts when Frank knocked on her door. Got a minute? Always. What's up? We just got a call from Jenkins Manufacturing. They want to place an order for custom parts worth $300,000. It's a 6-month contract with potential for renewal. Naomi looked up, surprised. Jenkins? They're one of the biggest manufacturers in the region. How did we get on their radar? One of our clients recommended us. Said we turned things around, that we were reliable again. Jenkins did their due diligence and liked what they saw. That's huge. It gets better. If we deliver on this contract, Jenkins has 2 other divisions that might want to work with us. We're talking potential annual revenue of over $1 million. Naomi felt a smile spread across her face, the first genuine smile in months. We can handle that, right? We have the capacity. We'll need to hire back some of the people we laid off and maybe add a second shift on the production floor. But yes, we can absolutely handle it. Then let's do it. Send them a proposal by end of day. After Frank left, Naomi allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Morrison Industries wasn't just surviving anymore. It was growing. Her father's company had a future after all. Her phone rang. An unknown number, but she answered anyway. Naomi Morrison? Yes. This is Detective Sarah Reeves with the Financial Crimes Division. I need to ask you some questions about Gerald Fletcher and his business dealings with Morrison Industries. Naomi sat up straight. I'm happy to answer questions. What's this about? We've received information suggesting Fletcher may have engaged in a pattern of fraud involving multiple companies. Your company is one of several we're investigating. Can you meet with me this week? Absolutely. I actually have evidence you might find useful. What kind of evidence? Documents, emails, and text messages showing coordination between Fletcher and his business associates to sabotage Morrison Industries' operations in order to force bankruptcy. There was a pause. That's a serious allegation. Do you have documentation? Extensive documentation. I've been building a case for months. Can you bring it to our meeting? I'll bring everything I have. After setting up an appointment with Detective Reeves, Naomi called Richard Patterson immediately. The police are investigating Gerald, she told him. Financial Crimes Division. I know. I'm the one who tipped them off. You? After reviewing your evidence, I realized Gerald's pattern of behavior likely violated multiple fraud statutes. Rather than just pursue civil action, I thought criminal charges might be appropriate. I contacted a detective I know in financial crimes, explained the situation, and provided preliminary evidence. Richard, you're a genius. I'm a thorough attorney. If we can get Gerald charged criminally, it makes your civil case against him much stronger. Plus, it would likely trigger his removal from the Morrison Industries board immediately. When's the board meeting? Next Thursday. Can you be ready? I'm ready now. Good. Because I spoke to Howard and Patricia yesterday. Told them we had serious concerns about Gerald's conduct and that we'd be presenting evidence. They both agreed to hear you out before making any decisions about the company's future. What did Gerald say? He doesn't know yet. We wanted to keep him in the dark until the meeting. He's going to explode. Almost certainly. But by then it won't matter. If our evidence is solid, he'll be voted off the board. The week before the board meeting, Naomi barely slept. She rehearsed her presentation, organized her evidence, and prepared for every possible counterargument Gerald might make. She knew he'd fight back, knew he'd accuse her of lying or manipulating evidence. She needed to be unshakable. She also knew she needed support. So she did something she hadn't done in months. She took an evening off and met Denise for dinner. You look exhausted, Denise said as soon as Naomi sat down at the restaurant table. I'm exhausted. But I'm close. So close to ending this. The divorce. The divorce, Gerald sabotage, all of it. Next Thursday, I present evidence to the board that Gerald's been deliberately destroying Dad's company. If it goes well, he gets removed and possibly faces criminal charges. And if it doesn't go well? Then I lose the company, the trust fund, and everything Dad worked for. But that's not going to happen. Denise reached across the table and took her hand. I'm proud of you. Dad would be proud too. I hope so. I've been running his company for 6 months, making decisions he never would have made, changing things he built. Sometimes I wonder if I'm honoring his legacy or destroying it. You're saving it. He'd see that. They talked for 2 hours about the company, about the divorce, about life after Trevor. It felt good to connect with her sister again, to remember she had family who cared about her beyond the business battles. Have you thought about what comes after? Denise asked as dinner wound down. Once the divorce is final and the company is stable? Sometimes. But it feels too far away to be real. You need to think about it. You're 34 years old. You can't spend the rest of your life fighting legal battles and running a company. Eventually you need to live. I am living. You're surviving. That's different. Naomi knew her sister was right, but she couldn't think about that now. Not when she was so close to winning. There would be time for life after victory. For now, she needed to focus on the fight. The night before the board meeting, Naomi met with Detective Reeves. The detective was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. This is impressive, she said after reviewing Naomi's evidence. You've essentially done our job for us. I had strong motivation. Fletcher's business partner, Richard Bronson, is going to be key. If we can get him to testify against Fletcher, we can build a strong case for fraud, conspiracy, and possibly racketeering. Racketeering? Fletcher's been doing this for years across multiple companies. That's a pattern of criminal enterprise. Bronson might be willing to cooperate if we offer him a deal. What about Trevor? Your ex-husband's more complicated. The evidence shows he knew about Fletcher's plans and coordinated with him. But proving he actively participated in the fraud, rather than just benefiting from it, is harder. But he'll face consequences in the divorce? Absolutely. With the evidence you've provided, he won't get a penny. In fact, you might be able to sue him for damages. I don't want his money. I just want him to face justice. Sometimes the best justice is watching someone lose everything they thought they'd gain. From what you've told me, Trevor thought he'd be rich. Instead, he'll be broke, divorced, and possibly facing charges as an accessory to fraud. That works for me. The morning of the board meeting, Naomi arrived at the office at 5 a.m. She went through her presentation one more time, checking every piece of evidence, every argument, every rebuttal. By the time Howard and Patricia arrived at 9, she was ready. Gerald showed up at exactly 9:30, his usual swagger in full effect. He had no idea what was coming. Richard Patterson arrived with a briefcase full of documents and the quiet confidence of a lawyer who knew he had the winning hand. The meeting started normally. Frank presented the financial reports, showing the company's improved performance. Howard asked questions about sustainability. Patricia wanted to know about the new contracts. Then Naomi stood up. Before we move on to other business, I need to address something serious. I've discovered evidence that Gerald Fletcher has been deliberately sabotaging Morrison Industries with the goal of forcing bankruptcy so he can acquire the company's assets at a reduced price. Gerald's expression didn't change. That's absurd. Is it? Naomi activated the presentation screen and began showing the evidence. The supplier changes. The emails to clients raising doubts. The connections between Gerald, Richard Bronson, and Great Lakes Distribution. The text messages with Trevor coordinating the divorce timing. With each piece of evidence, Gerald's face grew darker. This is a setup, he said when she finished. You've manufactured this evidence because you want to remove me from the board. The police don't think it's manufactured, Richard Patterson said calmly. Detective Reeves from Financial Crimes has reviewed everything and is pursuing criminal charges. Gerald's lawyer, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. My client denies all these allegations and will fight them vigorously. That's his right, Richard agreed. But in the meantime, this board needs to decide whether someone facing credible fraud charges should remain on the board of Morrison Industries. Howard looked sick. Patricia was staring at the evidence on the screen. You've been sabotaging us this whole time? Patricia asked Gerald. While we were working to save the company, you were actively destroying it? I was trying to protect my investment, Gerald said. The company was failing. Bankruptcy was the only option. Bankruptcy that would have benefited you personally, Naomi said, while everyone else lost their jobs. Business is business. This isn't business. This is fraud. The vote was unanimous. Gerald Fletcher was removed from the board, effective immediately. His 10% ownership stake would be bought back by the company at the original investment price. No profit for him after all his scheming. Gerald's lawyer tried to threaten lawsuits, but Richard Patterson shut him down with a reminder that Gerald was about to face criminal charges and that any civil suit would open him up to even more evidence discovery. Gerald left the boardroom in fury, his face red, his hands shaking. As he walked past Naomi, he leaned in close. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Naomi said calmly. You lost. After he left, the tension in the room eased. Howard and Patricia both apologized to Naomi for not seeing Gerald's sabotage sooner. How could you have known? Naomi said. He was careful. He hid his tracks. But not well enough. What happens now? Howard asked. Now we keep doing what we've been doing. Growing the company, serving our clients, rebuilding what my father started. Gerald's gone. The threat is over. We can finally focus on the future instead of fighting for survival. Frank caught up with her after the meeting. You did it? You actually did it. We did it. You helped me find the evidence. But you had the courage to go after him. A lot of people would have just accepted defeat, let the company fail, walked away with whatever scraps they could get. You fought. I didn't have a choice. This company was my father's legacy. I couldn't let Gerald and Trevor destroy it. Your father would be so proud. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. I hope so. That evening, she allowed herself a quiet celebration. She bought a good bottle of wine, cooked a real meal instead of eating takeout at her desk, and called her sister. Gerald's gone, she told Denise. Removed from the board, facing criminal charges, out of our lives. That's amazing. What about Trevor? The divorce hearing is next month. With everything we've found, Richard says Trevor won't get anything. The judge will see through his fraud. And the company? Profitable, growing, stable. I met the terms of the trust. Dad's $30 million is mine. So you won. You actually won. Naomi thought about that. Yeah, I guess I did. How does it feel? Exhausting. Satisfying. Strange. I spent 6 months fighting and now the fighting's over. I'm not sure what to do with myself. You live your life. You enjoy your victory. You figure out what comes next. What if I don't know what comes next? Then you take your time figuring it out. You've earned it. After hanging up, Naomi stood at her apartment window looking out at the city lights. 6 months ago, she'd been at her father's funeral, discovering her husband's betrayal, inheriting a failing company. She'd felt like her world was ending. But she'd fought back. She'd saved the company, exposed the conspiracy, and won. And now, for the first time in months, she could breathe. The hardest battles were over. Now came the interesting part, figuring out who she was on the other side of the fight. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a gray Tuesday morning in late November. Naomi sat in the courtroom with Richard Patterson, watching Trevor and his attorney shuffle papers at the opposing table. Trevor looked smaller, somehow diminished. His suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. The confident swagger that had once attracted her was gone. Brittany had filed her own suit against Trevor 2 weeks earlier, claiming fraud and demanding compensation for the job and apartment she'd given up based on his promises. That lawsuit was still pending, but it had clearly shaken him. He'd gone from expecting millions to facing multiple legal battles with no money to fight them. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Margaret Walsh entered, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. She'd reviewed the case files extensively, according to Richard, and had some pointed questions about Trevor's timing and motivations. "We're here for Morrison versus Morrison, divorce petition. I've reviewed both parties' filings." Judge Walsh looked over her reading glasses at Trevor. "Mr. Morrison, your petition claims entitlement to half of your wife's inheritance based on her father's death. Is that correct?" Trevor's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Morrison supported Mrs. Morrison through her father's illness and believes he's entitled to equitable distribution of marital assets, including the inheritance." "The inheritance that came after you filed for divorce?" the judge asked. The filing date was unfortunate timing. "Unfortunate timing," Judge Walsh repeated. "You filed for divorce 3 days before your father-in-law's death, while your wife was planning his funeral. My client's decision to file was based on irreconcilable differences that had existed for some time." "I'm sure they had." The judge turned to Richard. "Mr. Patterson, I've reviewed your counter-filing. You're claiming fraud." "Yes, Your Honor. We have extensive evidence that Mr. Trevor Morrison conspired with his uncle, Gerald Fletcher, to profit from Mr. Robert Morrison's death. The divorce filing was part of a deliberate plan to claim assets that Mr. Trevor Morrison and Mr. Fletcher believed would be substantial." "And were they substantial?" "The actual inheritance was modest, a struggling company with significant debt and a house with a mortgage. However, Mr. Trevor Morrison believed he was filing for millions based on information from his uncle, who was actively sabotaging Morrison Industries to force bankruptcy for his own profit." Judge Walsh's eyebrows rose. "That's quite an accusation. Do you have evidence?" "Extensive evidence, Your Honor. Including text messages between Mr. Trevor Morrison and Mr. Fletcher showing coordination and intent, emails proving Mr. Fletcher's sabotage, and testimony from Mr. Trevor Morrison's girlfriend confirming he was tracking Mr. Robert Morrison's illness and waiting for his death to file." "Your Honor, we object to the characterization," Trevor's lawyer began. "I'll make my own characterizations, counsel." Judge Walsh held out her hand. "Let me see this evidence." Richard handed up a thick folder. The judge spent 20 minutes reading through it, her expression growing darker with each page. Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His lawyer whispered urgently to him, but Trevor just shook his head. Finally, Judge Walsh set down the folder. "Mr. Morrison," she said, looking directly at Trevor, "did you or did you not discuss with your uncle Gerald Fletcher a plan to file for divorce after your father-in-law's death in order to claim inheritance assets?" Trevor's lawyer tried to intervene, but the judge held up her hand. "I'm asking Mr. Morrison directly. Answer the question." Trevor's face was pale. We discussed the timing, yes." "The timing? Meaning you specifically waited for your wife's father to die before filing for divorce?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain to me how text messages saying, 'once the old man kicks it, we're set,' should be interpreted." "I was upset, stressed." "You were plotting. You and your uncle were planning to profit from a dying man's assets. And when those assets turned out to be less than you expected, you still pursued this divorce, claiming you deserved half of a struggling business and demanding alimony for 5 years from a woman whose father you couldn't even be bothered to attend his funeral." Trevor's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client admits the optics are poor. The optics. Judge Walsh's voice could have frozen water. Counsel, your client engaged in what appears to be a conspiracy to defraud. The optics are the least of his concerns. She turned to Naomi. Mrs. Morrison, do you have any desire to reconcile with your husband? No, Your Honor. None whatsoever. I don't blame you. Mr. Morrison, I'm granting the divorce. You will receive nothing from your wife's inheritance, nothing from Morrison Industries, and no alimony. Furthermore, you will be responsible for Mrs. Morrison's legal fees in this matter, which I understand are substantial given your fraud necessitated extensive investigation. Trevor's lawyer tried one more time. Your Honor, we request reconsideration. Denied. Mr. Morrison, you came into this court expecting to profit from your calculated betrayal of your wife during her father's final days. Instead, you're leaving with nothing but legal bills and the knowledge that your own greed destroyed any chance at a fair settlement. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a satisfying crack. Trevor sat frozen in his chair. His lawyer packed up papers with jerky, angry movements. Across the aisle, Naomi felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. It's over, Richard said quietly. You're free. As they walked out of the courtroom, Trevor called after her. Naomi, wait. She stopped, turned to face him. He looked desperate, broken. I'm sorry, he said. I know it doesn't matter now, but I'm sorry. I made terrible choices. I let Gerald manipulate me. I thought. You thought you'd get rich off my father's death, Naomi finished. You thought you could use me, discard me, and live happily ever after with Brittany and a pile of money you didn't earn. It wasn't supposed to be like this. No, you're right. You were supposed to get away with it. But you underestimated me. You thought I'd be too heartbroken, too naive, too weak to fight back. That was your mistake. I lost everything. My job fired me when the fraud investigation became public. Brittany's suing me. I'm living in a studio apartment working retail to pay my legal bills. I have nothing. That's what you deserve. I know. But Naomi, I did love you. What? Before Gerald got in my head about the money. There was a time when we were happy. Maybe. But that time ended long before my father died. You chose greed over love. You chose manipulation over honesty. And now you get to live with those choices. Trevor's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I don't care. Naomi turned and walked away. In the elevator, Richard smiled at her. That was cold. Was it? Absolutely. And completely deserved. He wanted forgiveness. He wanted me to tell him it was okay, that I understood, that Gerald was really the bad guy. But you didn't give him that. No. Because it's not my job to make him feel better about his choices. He destroyed our marriage, betrayed my trust, and tried to profit from my father's death. He doesn't get absolution from me. You've become tougher than you were 6 months ago. I had to. The old Naomi would have forgiven him, would have taken some of the blame, would have tried to make peace. But that Naomi died in the house the day I found those divorce papers. The new Naomi fights back. Your father would approve. They had lunch at an expensive restaurant to celebrate the victory. Richard walked her through the next steps, finalizing the divorce paperwork, dealing with Gerald's criminal trial, securing the trust fund now that the company was profitable. The trust transfers to you within 30 days, Richard explained. 30 million, completely yours, no strings attached. What are you going to do with it? I haven't thought that far ahead. Start thinking. That's life-changing money. The company's life-changing. I saved my father's business. That matters more than the money. You can have both. Keep running Morrison Industries if you want, or hire a CEO and step back. With 30 million in the bank, you have options. Options? The word felt foreign after 6 months of having no choices, only necessities. She'd had to save the company, had to fight Trevor, had to expose Gerald. Now, suddenly she could do anything. I need time to process all this, she said. Take your time. You've earned it. That evening, Naomi returned to Morrison Industries. The office was empty, everyone had gone home for the day. She walked through the quiet building, remembering the first time she'd come here after her father's death. How desperate everything had seemed. How impossible the task ahead of her had felt. She ended up in what had been her father's office. Frank had kept it preserved, not wanting to disturb anything until Naomi decided what to do with it. She sat in her father's chair and looked around at his achievements, his memories, his life's work. I did it, Dad, she said to the empty room. I saved your company. I beat Trevor and Gerald. I proved I could do this. The room, of course, didn't answer. But Naomi felt a sense of peace settle over her. Her father had believed in her. He'd set up the trust as a test, yes, but also as a gift, the push she needed to become the person she was always capable of being. She'd passed his test. She'd earned his legacy. And now, for the first time in her adult life, she was completely free to decide who she wanted to be next. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Naomi sat in the gallery of a criminal courtroom, watching Gerald Fletcher's arraignment. Detective Reeves had done her job well. The charges included fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft, and pattern racketeering based on Gerald's history of sabotaging companies for profit. Richard Bronson, Gerald's business partner, had taken a plea deal and was testifying for the prosecution. He'd provided detailed evidence of how Gerald's scheme worked, including documents showing at least 6 other companies Gerald had deliberately destroyed. Gerald's attorney was arguing for bail, claiming his client was not a flight risk. The prosecutor disagreed, noting Gerald had substantial offshore accounts and connections in multiple countries. The judge set bail at $5 million. Gerald couldn't make it. He'd frozen his accounts when the investigation started, trying to hide assets. Now those same assets were tied up in legal proceedings, and he couldn't access them without proving their legal origin, which he couldn't do. He was remanded to custody pending trial. As they led Gerald out of the courtroom, he looked directly at Naomi. His expression was pure hatred. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. She'd won. He'd lost. And all his rage couldn't change that. Trevor wasn't at the arraignment, but Naomi heard he'd been called as a witness in Gerald's trial. The prosecution wanted to establish the full scope of Gerald's conspiracy, including how he'd manipulated his nephew into betraying his wife. According to Richard Patterson, Trevor was considering cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for immunity. He'd lose whatever remaining dignity he had, admitting in court that he'd married Naomi as part of a plan to profit from her father's assets, but at least he'd avoid criminal charges. He's going to testify against his own uncle, Richard told Naomi during a meeting about the trust fund transfer. Says Gerald manipulated him, pressured him, took advantage of his financial desperation. Is any of that true? Probably some of it. Gerald did help Trevor financially over the years, always with strings attached. But Trevor was a willing participant. He knew what they were doing was wrong and did it anyway. Because he wanted the money. Exactly. Trevor's not a victim. He's a co-conspirator trying to save himself. Will it work? Maybe. The prosecutor might accept his testimony in exchange for immunity, or they might charge him as an accessory. Hard to say. Naomi found she didn't care much either way. Trevor was no longer her concern. He'd lost his job, his girlfriend, his credibility, and any hope of profiting from his schemes. Whether he faced criminal charges or not, his life was ruined. The trust fund transferred on December 15th, appearing in Naomi's account as a number so large she had to count the zeros twice to believe it. $30 million. Her father's gift, her reward for saving his company. She sat at her desk at Morrison Industries, staring at the bank statement, feeling oddly numb. 6 months ago this money would have seemed like a fantasy. Now it felt like the end of a story, the final chapter closing. Frank knocked on her door. We just got confirmation on the Jenkins manufacturing renewal. They're doubling the order for next year. Plus, they've referred us to 3 other potential clients. That's great. Frank studied her. You don't seem excited. I am. I'm just tired, I guess. It's been a long year. It's been 6 months. Feels like years. Frank sat down across from her. What are you going to do now? I don't know. Keep running the company? Hire someone else to run it? Expand? Retire at 34? Those are all options. But what do you want? Naomi thought about the question. What did she want? She'd spent 6 months fighting for survival, driven by anger and determination and grief. But now that the fight was over, she didn't know how to just live. I want to build something, she said finally. Something new. Something that's mine, not just a legacy I'm preserving. Like what? I don't know yet. But I'm starting to have ideas. Over the next few weeks, those ideas crystallized into a plan. Morrison Industries was stable, profitable, and growing. It didn't need her constant attention anymore. Frank was perfectly capable of handling day-to-day operations, and the company had a strong team in place. What the company needed was strategic direction and capital for expansion. What Naomi had was both. She called a board meeting. I'm proposing we expand Morrison Industries into new markets, she told Howard, Patricia, and Frank. Not the kind of unfocused expansion my father attempted, but strategic growth in areas where we have expertise and competitive advantages. What kind of expansion? Patricia asked. I've been analyzing our most profitable contracts. We excel at custom manufacturing for construction and industrial clients. But we're limited by our current facility size and equipment. What if we opened a second location, specifically focused on larger-scale projects? That would require significant capital investment, Howard noted. I'm prepared to invest $10 million from my personal funds. Not as a loan, as an equity investment that increases my ownership stake. In return, I want to restructure the company's management, hire a CEO to handle operations, and position myself as chairwoman focused on strategic growth. Frank looked surprised. You're stepping back from day-to-day management? Not stepping back. Stepping up. I've proven I can save the company. Now I want to grow it into something bigger than my father ever imagined. But I can't do that if I'm buried in operational details. Who would you hire as CEO? I have someone in mind. A woman I met at a business conference last month, Rebecca Chin. She's currently VP of operations at a competing firm, but she's looking for a CEO position. I've done my research, she's exactly what we need. The board approved the plan unanimously. Within a month, Naomi had hired Rebecca Chin, opened negotiations for a second facility in a neighboring state, and begun transforming Morrison Industries from a struggling regional manufacturer into a growing company with national ambitions. She also started the Robert Morrison Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping other people save their family businesses. The foundation would provide consulting, mentorship, and in some cases, capital to keep companies alive during difficult transitions. Dad spent his life building things, she told Denise at the foundation's launch party. This is my way of honoring that. Helping other people protect what their families built. You're using Dad's legacy to create your own, Denise said. That's beautiful. The foundation's first project was helping a small manufacturing company in Detroit that was facing bankruptcy after the owner's sudden death. Naomi flew out to meet with the family, walked them through restructuring options, and provided a bridge loan to keep them afloat. Why are you helping us? The owner's daughter asked. You don't know us. Because 6 months ago I was where you are now, Naomi said. Grieving, overwhelmed, watching my father's life's work slip away. Someone should have helped me. Instead, I had to figure it out myself while fighting off people trying to profit from my father's death. I don't want others to go through that alone. The work was satisfying in a way that saving Morrison Industries hadn't been. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was building something positive, helping others, creating a legacy that went beyond profit margins and balance sheets. She also started dating again. Not seriously, just casual dinners and coffee with interesting people she met through business or friends. After Trevor's betrayal, she wasn't ready for anything heavy. But she was learning to trust again, to let people in, to believe not everyone had ulterior motives. One dinner date turned into 2, then 3. His name was Gabriel Torres, an architect who specialized in sustainable building design. He was funny, kind, successful in his own right, and completely uninterested in her money or her business. He liked her for her, not for what she could give him. You're different than I expected, Gabriel told her on their 4th date. The press makes you sound like some corporate warrior. But you're actually warm, funny? The corporate warrior part is real too, Naomi said. I can be both. I like that. You're complex. Damaged is more accurate. No, strong. There's a difference. Naomi smiled. Maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't broken after all. Just stronger in places where she'd been wounded. By the time Gerald's trial started in March, Naomi had moved fully into her new life. The trial was a media circus, wealthy investor, elaborate fraud scheme, multiple victims coming forward. Naomi was called to testify about Morrison Industries, walking the jury through how Gerald had sabotaged the company and attempted to force bankruptcy for his profit. Trevor testified too, looking ashamed as he described his role in the conspiracy. His testimony was damaging to Gerald but humiliating to himself. Several jurors looked at him with visible contempt. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. Gerald was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to all his victims. His assets were frozen and would be liquidated to pay his debts. He'd be 70 years old when released, broke, disgraced, destroyed. Justice, Frank said when they heard the verdict. Justice, Naomi agreed. But the word felt hollow somehow. She'd won. Gerald was imprisoned. Trevor was disgraced. Morrison Industries was thriving. She had $30 million, a growing foundation, a new relationship, and a future full of possibilities. She'd gotten everything she fought for. So why did she still feel empty? The answer came to her one night while working late at the foundation office. She was reviewing applications from families who needed help saving their businesses, reading stories of grief and desperation and determination. Each story reminded her of her own journey, her own pain. She'd spent 6 months in survival mode, driven by rage and grief and the need to prove herself. But she'd never really processed her father's death. She'd never let herself grieve properly. She'd been too busy fighting to feel. Now the fighting was over and all that suppressed grief came rushing back. She broke down crying at her desk, mourning not just her father, but the innocent version of herself who'd existed before Trevor's betrayal. The part of her that had trusted easily, loved freely, believed the best in people. That Naomi was gone. The woman who'd emerged from the ashes was harder, smarter, more capable. But she'd lost something too, a certain lightness, a belief that the world was fundamentally good. Gabriel found her like that, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by applications from desperate families. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "What's wrong?" "Everything. Nothing. I don't know. I won, Gabriel. I saved the company, beat Trevor and Gerald, got the trust fund. I won. So why do I feel like I've lost something?" "Because you did lose something. Your father, your marriage, your innocence. Winning doesn't erase that. Then what was the point? If I still hurt this much, what was the point of fighting? The point was surviving. Healing comes later." Naomi leaned into him, letting him hold her while she cried. For the first time in months, she let herself be vulnerable, let herself need someone, let herself admit she wasn't as strong as she pretended. "I miss him," she whispered. "I miss my dad. And I never got to say goodbye properly because I was too busy fighting to save his company." "He knew you loved him. Did he? Or did he just see me as a business successor? Someone to carry on his legacy?" "He saw you as his daughter. The rest was just how he chose to show his love." Naomi thought about the letter her father had left her. About his belief in her strength, his pride in her capabilities. Maybe Gabriel was right. Maybe the trust, the challenge, the test, maybe that was how her father said, "I love you." Not perfect. Not what she'd needed. But love nonetheless. "Thank you," she told Gabriel. "For what?" "Father's company. You're so much more than that. And eventually you'll see it too." He was right. She would. But for now, she let herself cry, let herself grieve, let herself be human instead of a warrior. The fight was over. Now came the harder part, learning to live with her victories and her losses, and figuring out who she wanted to be in the space between. 1 year after her father's funeral, Naomi stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Morrison Industries' new facility. The building was twice the size of the original location, equipped with state-of-the-art equipment, and staffed by a team that had grown from 35 employees to over 100. Rebecca Chin, the CEO, stood beside her, beaming with pride. In the 6 months since taking over operations, Rebecca had exceeded every growth target Naomi had set. The company was no longer just stable, it was thriving. "Your father would be amazed," Frank said, appearing at Naomi's elbow. "He always dreamed of expanding. He just went about it the wrong way." "He tried to do too much too fast," Naomi agreed. "We're being more strategic." "Wait, you're barely here anymore." It was true. Naomi had transitioned from CEO to chairwoman, spending most of her time on the foundation and strategic planning rather than day-to-day operations. She visited the Morrison Industries offices twice a week, attended board meetings, reviewed major decisions. But the company no longer consumed her life. "That was the point," she said. "Build something that could run without me." Dad made himself indispensable, which meant the company struggled when he got sick. "I wanted to create something more sustainable." "And you did. Morrison Industries is going to outlive all of us." The ceremony began. Naomi gave a short speech about growth, legacy, and the importance of building for the future. She mentioned her father's vision, his dedication, his belief in the power of American manufacturing. She didn't mention his failures, his struggles, or how close the company had come to collapse. That part of the story was private. The world didn't need to know how hard she'd fought to save this place. After the ceremony, she found Gabriel waiting near his car. He'd flown in from Chicago, where he was overseeing a major project. They'd been dating for 7 months now, taking it slow, building trust. "That was a nice speech," he said, pulling her into a hug. "I hate public speaking." "You hide it well. Come on, we have a reservation." They drove to one of Naomi's favorite restaurants, a small Italian place that her father had loved. She hadn't been there since before his death, couldn't face the memories. But she was ready now. The owner recognized her immediately. Naomi. It's been too long. Your father, he loved this place. Always ordered the same thing: chicken parmesan, side salad, garlic bread. I remember. He would be so proud of you. I read about the company, about how you saved it. He always said you were smart like him. The memory brought tears to her eyes, but they were good tears. Healing tears. Over dinner, Gabriel asked about the foundation. We've helped 12 families save their businesses in the past 8 months, Naomi said. Some with consulting, some with bridge loans, one with a full capital investment. The success rate is about 70%, which is better than I hoped. And the ones that don't succeed? We help them close down honorably. Sometimes saving the business isn't possible, but we can help them minimize losses, protect employees, transition with dignity. That's not what your father wanted, though. He wanted you to save every business. My father wanted a lot of things. But I've learned I can't save everyone. Sometimes the best you can do is help people land softly. Gabriel reached across the table and took her hand. You've changed since we met. You seem lighter somehow. I feel lighter. For the first time in a year, I'm not angry all the time. I'm not fighting. I'm just living. What about Trevor? Or Gerald? Do you ever think about them? Naomi considered the question. Sometimes. Trevor's working as a sales associate at an electronics store. Brittany dropped her lawsuit when she realized he had no money to take. He's apparently dating someone new, telling her he's a businessman who hit some bad luck. Same patterns. Always. Gerald's in prison, probably will be for the next decade. His lawyer keeps filing appeals, but they all get rejected. Justice system worked the way it's supposed to for once. And you feel satisfied with that? I feel complete with it. They faced consequences. I got my revenge. Now I'm moving on. To what? That's the question, isn't it? Naomi smiled. I'm 34 years old. I have more money than I can spend, a company that runs itself, a foundation that's doing good work. What comes next? What do you want to come next? I think I want to live. Not just survive or succeed or prove anything. Just live. Travel, spend time with people I love, wake up without a plan sometimes. That sounds healthy. It sounds terrifying. I've been in crisis mode for so long, I don't know how to just be. You'll learn. And I'll help if you want. Naomi looked at Gabriel, kind, patient, supportive Gabriel who'd been there through the trial, the foundation launch, all of it. He'd never pushed, never demanded, never tried to fix her. He'd just been present. I'd like that, she said. 3 weeks later, Naomi flew to Hawaii alone. Not for business, not for a conference, not for anything productive. Just to sit on a beach and stare at the ocean and remember who she was before her life became a battlefield. She spent a week doing nothing. Reading books, swimming, eating whatever she wanted, talking to strangers. No schedule, no plan, no goals. It was the hardest week of her life. Every day she fought the urge to check work emails, call the foundation, review financial reports. Her hands itched for productivity. Her mind demanded purpose. But she forced herself to sit still. To be present. To heal. On the last day she wrote a letter to her father. Not to send anywhere he was gone. But to say the things she'd never gotten to say, to close the loop on their relationship. Dad, I saved your company. I know that's what you wanted, what you challenged me to do. And I did it. Morrison Industries is strong, profitable, growing. You'd be proud. But I'm not sure that's the achievement you thought it would be. Saving the company didn't heal my grief. Beating Trevor and Gerald didn't make me whole. The money didn't fix anything. What did help was building something new. The foundation, helping other families, creating a legacy that's mine, not just yours. That's where I found meaning. I don't know if you understood how much pressure you put on me with that trust fund challenge. Maybe you thought you were motivating me. Maybe you didn't realize how scared I was, how close I came to failing. But I made it. And now I'm building a life that's beyond your vision for me. I'm not just the daughter who saved her father's company. I'm Naomi Morrison, businesswoman, philanthropist, survivor. I miss you. I wish I'd had more time with you. I wish the last year of your life hadn't been overshadowed by Trevor's betrayal and Gerald's scheme. I wish a lot of things. But I'm grateful too. For the challenge, for believing in me, for giving me the push I needed to become who I am now. I hope you're proud. I hope you know I loved you. And I hope wherever you are you're at peace. Your daughter, Naomi. She folded the letter and left it on the beach, letting the tide take it out to sea. Symbolic closure. Letting go. When she returned home, Gabriel was waiting at the airport with flowers. How was Hawaii? He asked. Hard. Good. Necessary. Ready to come back to reality? Ready to create a new reality. One that's not defined by fighting or surviving or proving anything. Just living. That sounds like a good plan. They drove back to her apartment, talking about his Chicago project, her foundation applications, mundane details of life. Normal conversation between people who cared about each other. Later, curled up on her couch with Gabriel, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in over a year. Contentment. Not happiness, not yet. Contentment. The sense that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she should be doing, with exactly the right person beside her. I think I'm ready, she said quietly. Ready for what? To stop being the woman who saved her father's company and start being just Naomi. To stop defining myself by what I survived and start defining myself by what I'm building. You've always been just Naomi to me. I know. That's why I love you. The words were out before she'd thought about them. Gabriel smiled. I love you too. Simple words. Simple moment. But it marked a turning point. Naomi was letting someone in again, trusting again, believing in the possibility of love that wasn't transactional or strategic or conditional. The next few months unfolded with a normalcy that would have bored her a year ago but now felt precious. She worked on foundation projects, spent weekends with Gabriel, had dinners with Denise and her family. She started attending a grief support group, finally processing her father's death in healthy ways. Morrison Industries continued to grow. Rebecca Chen was talking about opening a third facility, expanding into new markets. The company Naomi had saved was becoming something bigger than even her father had dreamed. Trevor sent her a message one day, asking if they could meet for coffee. She deleted it without responding. He was her past and she was done looking backward. Gerald's appeals were all denied. He'd serve his full sentence. Occasionally, Naomi saw news stories about other victims of his fraud schemes coming forward. The investigation had exposed decades of financial crimes. Gerald would likely die in prison. She felt no satisfaction in that. No joy in his suffering. Just closure. The fight was over. Justice had been served. She could move on. On the anniversary of her father's death, Naomi returned to his grave. She brought flowers and the letter she'd written in Hawaii, a copy she'd kept. I did it, Dad, she said to the headstone. I saved your company. Beat the bad guys. Built something you'd be proud of. And I survived. More than survived, I'm actually happy now. Can you believe that? After everything, I'm happy. The grave, of course, didn't answer. But standing there, Naomi felt at peace. She'd done what her father asked. She'd proven herself. She'd earned his legacy. And now she was building her own. 6 months later, Gabriel proposed. Not with fanfare or drama, just a quiet moment at home, both of them in sweatpants watching TV. Marry me, he said during a commercial break. What? Marry me. Not because we need to, or because it makes financial sense, or because of anything except that I love you and want to spend my life with you. Naomi thought about her first marriage. Trevor's calculated proposal, the hidden motives, the betrayal that was already being planned. She thought about how different this was, simple, honest, real. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. They planned a small wedding. Just family and close friends. No big production, no expensive venue. Just a commitment between two people who'd found each other after they'd both learned the hard lessons about trust and love. Denise was her maid of honor. Frank and Rebecca attended from Morrison Industries. Gabriel's large family flew in from around the country. It was warm, intimate, perfect. As Naomi walked down the aisle, she thought about how far she'd traveled in the 2 years since her father's death. From grief and betrayal to strength and love. From fighting for survival to building a life worth living. The ceremony was short. The vows were simple. When Gabriel kissed her, Naomi felt tears on her cheeks, happy tears this time, not grief. At the reception, Frank raised a toast. To Naomi, who taught us all that the best revenge is a life well lived. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. But as Naomi looked around at the people she loved, at the life she'd built from the ashes of betrayal, she realized Frank was only partly right. The best revenge wasn't just living well. It was becoming someone stronger, kinder, more capable than the people who tried to destroy you. It was building something beautiful from their attempts to tear you down. Trevor and Gerald had tried to profit from her father's death. Instead, they'd unleashed something they couldn't control, Naomi's determination to not just survive, but to thrive. She'd saved her father's company, built a foundation that helped others, found love again, created a life that was authentically hers. That was the real victory. Not the $30 million, not Gerald's imprisonment, not Trevor's disgrace. The real victory was standing here 2 years later, genuinely happy and at peace. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked, pulling her onto the dance floor. "How grateful I am that Trevor filed those divorce papers." "Really? Really? If he hadn't, I'd still be trapped in a fake marriage with a man who didn't love me. I'd never have discovered my own strength. I'd never have met you. So you're thanking him for his betrayal?" "I'm thanking him for the opportunity it created. He thought he was destroying me. Instead, he freed me." Gabriel spun her around. "You're an impressive woman, Naomi Morrison Torres." "I know." They danced, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating not just a wedding but a triumph. Naomi had fought her battles, won her victories, and earned her happy ending. Morrison Industries thrived. The foundation grew. Her marriage was built on honesty and respect. She created a life her father would be proud of, not because she'd followed his exact vision, but because she'd taken his challenge and made it her own. That night, lying next to Gabriel in their hotel room, Naomi allowed herself to finally, fully, completely let go of the past year's pain. Trevor was working retail, broke and alone. Gerald was in prison. Brittany had moved on to her next mark. They were all footnotes in someone else's story now, not major characters in hers. And Naomi? Naomi was the CEO of her own life, the architect of her own happiness, the author of her own ending. She'd gone from widow and betrayed wife to businesswoman and philanthropist. From victim to victor. From broken to whole. The inheritance her father left wasn't just $30 million and a company. It was the challenge that forced her to discover who she really was. And who she was, it turned out, was extraordinary. "I love you," Gabriel murmured sleepily beside her. "I love you too." Simple words. Honest words. The kind of love she'd once thought she had with Trevor but had been an illusion. This was real. This was earned. This was hers.